All right, so today what I want to talk about is functional programming versus object-oriented programming. In the world of software development, there are two programming paradigms that people follow. One is object-oriented programming, which is slightly more popular, and the other one is functional programming, which is less popular but faster overall. Now, there's no clear winner. There's pros and cons to both sides. Object orientation, a whole bunch of stuff is stored inside your object, which takes up more memory, but everything is available via the object. Functional programming, it's much faster, but you have to be very, very conscious of what comes in and out. And I'll show you what that means. So let's say that we have just a regular function called add. I have number 1 and number 2. I'm just going to print for now, number 1 plus number 2. This is an example of what's called functional programming. So I've got two numbers that I'm passing in to this add function. And when I call add with 1 and 2, wouldn't you know, it prints out 3. So Python example.py, and I get 3. Now, what I mean by this is an example of functional programming is that functional programming, you don't care, you're not holding track of any sort of state. You're not keeping track of, like, did I alter this before? Do I have any instance variables? This is very, very simple. It's just I give an x like 1 and 2, return y. You can do anything you want underneath the hood. So I can just change this quite as easily to print number 2 plus number 1. And this would work just as well. So again, functional programming, we don't change anything related to state. So it's like, it's very transactional. So I will go to, like if you were to think about functional programming in real life, you go to the laundromat, you hand them the clothes, and they give you the clothes later. You don't know what's happening under the hood, and you don't care. Like all you care about is I give you my input, and I get an output in return. That's it. Now, on the other hand, you have to, the laundromat itself is more of like object-oriented programming. They need to keep track of different things. So your method might be like drop off clothes at laundromat. So you have drop off clothes at laundromat. This is your method. You give them something, they give you something back. Unfortunately, on their end, they have to think about much, much more. They have to think about, when did this customer come in? When is this customer expecting things? Like, oftentimes, a lot of dry cleaners don't have the machines on site to clean that particular article of clothing, so they have to call somebody to pick it up in a van and drop it off at an industrial cleaning site, and then figure out when to pick that up so that you can bring that all back. That's all stuff that you have to keep track of state. So it's whenever you have to keep track of more than one item, that's the idea of state. And that's where object-oriented programming works a little bit better than this. Because imagine if you had to create a bunch of methods and you didn't know track of state. So it's like clean clothes at big facility. You have to keep track of so many things like item of clothing, customer name, time of drop-off, time expected to, and so on and so forth. You have to keep track of so many things in order for functional programming to work. Versus if you were to hold that all inside of an object, you can just reference them at different times rather than passing it in. So going back to the one that we had a little bit earlier, this is an example of functional programming. This is what's called a pure function. It always produces the same output based off of your input, and that has no side effects. It doesn't impact anything else. Was that just a stretch, or was that? Sorry, just stretching. Okay.
This is kind of random, but there was you guys described a new way to declare functions in JavaScript.
Yep.
Where it was like const, the name.
Yep.
Blah blah. Can we see that again?
Sure. I'm going to do that a little bit later. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll make a note of it. Go over that arrow functions.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Feel good about functional programming? You give X to go in, you get Y coming out. It doesn't matter what else happens. Now, when we deal with stuff like object-oriented programming, we're keeping track of things like state. So let's say I have a class account. Let's pretend this is like a bank account of some sort. All right. So when I first create my bank account, what are some things I need to keep track of? What's that? The name. Let's call it owner name, and maybe initial balance. All right. I'm going to create an owner name and initial balance. All right. So you can kind of see just kind of like the difference from up here. The functional programming, you give an X and you're giving out Y. You don't need to keep track of state at all because everything that you ever need, you're going to be passing in. Account, though, keeps track of a bunch of things like the owner name, the initial balance. But what are some methods that you might have for a checking account? Deposit. All right, I'm going to pass in self for right now, and I'm just going to say pass. Give me some other methods that you would have for a checking account. Withdraw. And what was that? Debit, withdraw, same thing. Anything else? Check balance. Anything else? We can start with these three. Why not? So let's say that I want to create an account. I want to create an account. So let's say John's account is equal to account. I'm going to pass in my name first because that's what they're expecting. Yeah. And I'm super baller, so my initial balance is $5 million. All right, so I have a lot of money, $5 million. So at this, dang it. No, it's $5 million. It's $5 million. Yeah. Just became very poor. All right, so I've got John's account. It's a local variable to example.py, and I'm passing in two arguments. I've got owner name and initial balance right over here. So if I ever need to reference the owner name or the initial balance ever, then I have then I can use the self dot in the front to make it an instance variable. I'm going to need to use those over here. So the initial balance is equal to this balance here, but is there something else that I need to keep track of? Like something else that account needs to know about itself at all times? The current balance. Let's say self.current balance is equal to initial balance. So I have maybe I would say def print info. That's another method. So I create a new checking account or account. It has a name, an initial balance, and a current balance. The initial balance is what you opened it with. Maybe you'll need that at one point. But the current balance is what the running balance is. Now let's say I want to, first of all, I just want to print info. Or let's do check balance. I want to write a method called check balance that returns me the balance that I have right now. In one line, what is the code that I need to type using the variables that I've got up here? Let's go with all. Yep. So Jonathan is down over here. Yep. Yep. I just want the balance that I've got. What's that? Current balance. Yep. So I've got a method called check balance. Think about when you walk up to like an ATM or you want to load something up on your phone. Like there's probably a method that says check balance. Inside of the account, it knows things like current balance. So all I need to do to check balance is return current balance. That is correct. So let's say that we want to print the info about this account. Let's say this account is owned by Jonathan and has a current balance of blah. I want to create a method that does this. So let's go to Karen. What method do I need to write in order to print info about this? Print. Let's do return, but actually let's do print. Why not? Yep. This account is owned by. Curly braces. Yep. And has a current balance of self.current balance. So, yep. So what we've got here is we've got a method called print info. Print info just runs print, and then we have a formatted string that's this F that comes in the beginning. So anytime that you want to interpolate, you want to put the F in the front of the string. This account is owned by the owner name. Now I put the self in the front because I pass in owner name when I first create the account, but every time I reference owner name, I know I'm going to need to reference owner name again and again. I made it into an instance variable by putting self in the front, and I put owner name right over here. So this account is owned by whatever the value of this is, and has a current balance of self.current balance. Perfect. Another option that we could do, we could either do self.current balance, which will just read this, or we could do self.check balance, and call the method which returns the current balance. So those are two ways of doing the exact same thing. I'm just going to do current balance for right now. Any questions so far? Good. All right, so let's talk about this deposit and this withdrawal. Actually, let's first try to see if John's account dot check balance, does this work? Python example.py, invalid syntax. Shoot. Okay, so it blew up, which is fine. So it says line 5, invalid syntax right over here. If I go up, line 5, oh, there's no colon at the end. That's the way that I go through it. Oh, you're right. I'm just going through the process for the benefit of everybody. So yeah, line gives you the line number. Look at the line number, invalid syntax. What's missing over here? There's missing a colon. That's what Python requires. So I go over here, and nothing comes back for check balance. Nothing happens. What's that? I'm not printing anything. So either I need to change this thing to print, or put a print in the front. I'm just going to print, actually. No, I'll do printing. Let's try this one more time. All right, so my current balance is lots of money, 5 million bucks. All right, so let's say that I want to deposit some money. I just made a bunch of money, and I want to deposit it. What is the process of, what do I need to do in order to deposit? Do I need to pass in anything? Do I need to update any instance variables? Let's go with Kyle.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. I want to create a deposit method that basically updates my balance so that I know how much money I have at any given time. So let's say I just came off of a concert and I got paid $500,000. All right, and then I want to check my balance again after that.
Okay, so you would go up.
Sure.
Okay, so you would create a function essentially that would add your initial balance to the deposit itself.
Okay, initial balance or current balance?
Current balance.
Current balance. Okay, you are correct. That is, I mean, that's essentially what a deposit does, right? I'm going to give you a number, 500,000 in this case, and you're going to add it to current balance. Okay, tell me what to type because I've got that method set up for you.
Okay, so you'll just do initial balance. You've already got initial balance.
Yep.
Plus current balance.
Mm-hmm.
You could like go in and just say $500,000.
Yeah, but I'm passing in some number. Right now, I'm just depositing.
Yeah.
All right, so let's say deposit amount. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, missing anything?
Printing it.
What else? Where does deposit amount is magically coming into this method right now? So
you would
go ahead.
Would you create a variable?
Yes, that is exactly what it is. So I've got deposit. It's taking in some sort of deposit amount. I know that I'm going to add that to my current balance, so that makes sense. But I do need to pass that in, deposit amount here. Otherwise, it doesn't know what deposit amount is. So if I pass that in as a parameter, we should be all set. So again, we've got my example right here. I've got this account, John's account, initialized with $5 million. So I check the balance right away. It says I have 5 million. I deposit 500,000, and when I check the balance again, you can kind of see it kept track of the initial one, and not only that, it updated it as well. Now, using that same line of logic, I'm going to do withdraw. I'm going to go to Chad. I need to withdraw money, so I like to buy a bunch. I like watches, so I'm going to withdraw. What's that? I like Rolex and Patek Philippe, all those. But it's like 40 grand.
Yeah.
I don't have 40 grand, so I like them. I can't afford them. But in my fantasy, I'm a super baller, so I'm going to withdraw $40,000 to buy a Patek Philippe Nautilus.
Yes, you create a parameter.
Okay. What do you want to call it?
Withdraw amount.
Withdraw amount. I like the names of the variables. They're super descriptive. What else?
And then you have to change the balance. So self-current balance minus withdraw amount.
All right, so let's see if this works. I'm going to just copy this line and paste it over here. So what I've done here is I've got this account. I'm checking the balance right away. It should be this. I'm depositing money and checking it, so they should update my current balance. And I'm going to withdraw some money. Please work. And it does. So this is like the power of using object-oriented programming. You get to keep track of different variables within your particular instance of the class. So you have things like owner name and initial balance and current balance. When you deposit and you withdraw, it keeps track of that particular instance's current balance and updates things accordingly. If you were to do the same thing using functional programming, it takes a lot more code and it's a little bit more challenging. One of them is that if you were to deposit, you have to keep track of account, like the account number itself, withdraw amount, deposit amount, initial current balance. So you need to pass all those things in because the account, you need to keep a ledger of it and you need to keep track of how much they have. You need to have the account number, the deposit number, and the current balance in order to do the exact same thing versus having it in object-oriented programming. Same thing with withdraw, you have to keep track of which account are you talking about, what's the balance that they have right now, and what's the amount that you want to withdraw. So it's two ways of doing the exact same thing. This one's much faster though, because you don't have to hold anything in memory. This one holds 3 variables, a bunch of methods inside of there in memory, so it takes a little bit more time. Sure. On the bottom, we've got object-oriented programming to keep track of something called an account. Now, object-oriented programming, you can kind of think of the class as a noun. These are adjectives that describe the noun or attributes to the noun. These are methods or verbs that this particular noun can do. So for our account, we have adjectives or attributes like this account belongs to this owner, has an initial balance when it first was created of this amount, and current balance equal to initial balance to begin with, but it's going to be updated. So those are attributes to this particular account noun. Then account also has these verbs, these methods that it can do. So the account can print info, and using the information that it knows about its attributes, it can do stuff. It can deposit money, which will update an attribute about it. It can withdraw money, and you can check the balance. So, sorry, this is a different method. So this is just an example of how to do like deposit, withdrawal, and checking balance using object-oriented programming. You could do the exact same using functional programming. So let's say I wanted to deposit something. Basically, I would have to pass in 3 things: the account number that you want to update, the deposit amount that you want to deposit, and the current balance inside of the current balance, or actually probably not current balance. You probably have to pass in the entire object where you can't use any objects. Okay, so you need the account number, the deposit amount, and the current balance in order to achieve the same thing. So this one just requires one variable because it's nested within the account class. The current balance is saved to the instance right here on line 8. And this, you only need to pass in one thing, which will alter the state of the account. This one is a pure function, which you would do some stuff. This one's called a pure function because you're passing in something and getting something out without altering anything. I don't use functional programming very often.
You could like manipulate an object outside of your function or outside of your function.
Sure, you could do that. So if I have like John's account equal to just a giant object where it's like account number is 123, current balance equal to that, and then you could pass in the account object, but then you're already going to this area. So this is also totally okay. Then you're going to do account deposit. Yep.
How do I become the baller like this?
Account number equals deposit. So like that. This is a way to do it using functional programming. It's pure to be coming in one way and going out another way. So you're just altering this one, but you're still altering something, so it's not true functional programming.
Why is that not functional? I just feel like the self deposit account, you use it as so easy because you can call it at any time, but the other one on top you can only call it once. Like it doesn't have self, so you can't make new instances of it, and that's what OP means. Like you can make new instances.
Partially true.
I guess what I was saying is like, so you passed in the
It's still passing an entire object, which is
okay. So like in JavaScript, you can just pretty sure it works when you manipulate an object that's outside of, even though it's not. Even though
I guess you're right.
like an object's not
Yeah,
your scope, you
yeah.
can still do it.
Yeah. Technically speaking, this is still functional programming because I'm passing in the entire object. I'm giving you the deposit amount, and then while I'm altering this, I'm still just even though I'm altering this particular account, I'm not keeping track of anything. It still operates on its own. Versus when I do deposit within the account, it alters other stuff within the account. Yeah, I can see that argument. Should we do another example of account using a real life example? I think this is easier to understand than dog, right? Okay, give me one more noun that we can do stuff with. House. Sure. Let's do class. India Platoon. Okay. So I have an init function. Actually, let's call it code platoon cohort. All right. So every single code platoon cohort takes in a few things. They have a cohort name and a list of students. Let's do self.cohort name equals cohort name because we probably need that. Forgetting that one. Self.list of students equals list of students, or I can also shorten this just to students. Okay. So let's say we have India Platoon equals code platoon cohort with India Platoon. And the list of students, I'm just going to go with the first three people, Kyle, Chad, and Henry. What are some things that I can do with Code Platoon cohort? Maybe I can add a student and remove a student. So let's do that with those real quick. Def add a student, self pass, and def remove a student, self pass.
Who scores?
Yeah.
Let's do attendance for that. Here, not here.
Attendance is interesting because then I probably have to create attendance records. We could do that. I mean,
I did it through calls.
let's just do add and remove a student. This is easy. Like I'm just trying to show like how to alter stuff pretty easily. Maybe we can let's just say we're going to create an India Platoon cohort, and I just want to see all the students. Now you'll notice that I'm not calling this as a method, because once you have something as an attribute like self.students, an instance variable, you can just call it directly. It's not a method because it's not an actual method that I wrote. It's just something that you know about. So let's run this, clear the screen, and nothing works because I need to print this. I currently have 3 students, Kyle, Chad, and Henry, and I want to add a student. So let's continue around. Christina, if I just want to add a student, what is the code that I need to write to add a student and then see my current list of students?
Student dot or you stop student.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, student. Let's say student name for now.
So if you student name or self dot student name plus equals to students.
Like that?
Yeah.
Other way around. So the students on line 4 is a list of the students that passed in, and I want to alter that thing. So that's why I need to append to this. Did I lose you on that one?
Also, a quick thing for self-taught students, you can plus equal it as long as you put student name in square brackets. You know, they find that easier to read.
These two things are synonymous. Learn something new. All right, so let's see. I've got my students right now, and I want to add a student. So let's see if this one works successfully. Add a student, and I'm going to add in 1. I'm going to print the students one more time. So I start off with Kyle, Chad, and Henry. Then I add in 1 as a student, and then now the original student's instance variable has been altered. Now let's say that I'm going to add in 1 more student named Josh. There's no Josh in here besides the instructor, right? Okay. All right, so I'm going to add 1 more student named Josh and see how it goes. So I started with this group of students. Then I added 1, and I printed the number of students that I had. Then I added Josh, and then you can kind of see this is the list of students that I have right here. Now Josh is not doing terribly well. He got sick. He says I need to take off, and I can't be part of the class anymore, so I need to remove him. Eventually, I'm going to India Platoon.remove a student. I'm going to remove Josh. How do I write this method over here, 1?
Or you create a new argument.
Okay, new argument. And I'll just call this one student name because it's just descriptive.
You look for the student, so I'm just going to be a for loop.
Okay. Is there we could do a for loop? So you're saying like we should look through every student once you find that guy to delete them?
Unless there's another method that we're about.
There is a for method. The for loop does work. There is a built-in in Python, but I'm not sure what it is. I know you have it, but I'm not sure what it is. I don't know. Remove item from list Python.
Should be for the last.
All right, so it looks like there's a remove function. Oh, it looks like this. This looks pretty simple. Some list, remove the element. Let's see it if that works. So if it, I think it's self.students.remove student name. Let's see if this works. And it does. So we started off here. We added one. We added Josh. Josh got sick. He doesn't want to be part of the cohort anymore, so I removed him and I printed out the students. I've got one right over here. So this is a very simple example of like, these are instance variables. They keep track of certain information. You can update them. You can remove things. You can not use them at all inside of your methods over here. That's totally okay. Now, one final thing, and then I promise we'll take a break, is let's say that I have two classes that want to play with each other. So I've got a class called Platoon cohort, and right now all I've got is, like all I'm doing is adding names to an array, and that's okay, but it's kind of boring. I'm going to create a class called student. All right, def init. Every student has a first name, last name, and branch of service. Right. And I'm just going to do self. This is going to take too long. I'm going to highlight this here, paste it. I see that they're all separated by commas, so I'm just going to highlight the comma. I have two cursors, go like that, and I'm just going to do self dot equals. So I just saved myself a few keystrokes. All right, and let's say def tell me about yourself. Just a quick print. My name is first name, last name. So what I'm going to do here is, instead of taking the list of students like this, I'm going to add a student. Basically, what I'm going to do. So what I've created up here is a class called student. Pretty simple. Every student here has a first name, a last name, and a branch of service. And you have an ability to tell me about yourself. We also have a Code Platoon cohort, and I want to populate this Code Platoon students array with a bunch of student objects rather than a bunch of strings that is just your first name. So I'm actually going to nuke this whole thing, and we're going to try to start over. So I've got India Platoon. It's got, if I were just to print the students so far, I should get nothing, which makes sense because I have an empty array for the student. Now, when I add a student, I'm not adding the student just their name. I'm adding an entire student object. And in order to do that, I'm going to create a student. So let's say it's student one equals, where did I leave off? All right, I'm going to create a new student. It takes in 3 arguments. In order, it's going to be first name, last name, and branch of service. So we got Holly, Bird, and the Marine Corps. So I've created a student, and I'm going to add that student to India Platoon using this add a student method. So if I do India Platoon, add a student, and pass in the entire object, and I print students again, we won't get an empty array, but instead we will get this weird looking thing here. I don't know what that is. So this is actually the student object that we just created. What's that? It's where it's stored. This thing right over here, this 0 times whatever, this is its particular memory address on your machine. Now, this doesn't look great. I don't like how this looks whatsoever, so I want to change this. So I want to do, I think it's def stir, self, return Actually, I think I could just do return self. Tell me about yourself. See if this works. Nope.
Can you go back to your you refer to student instead of
Yep. So before I was just appending a student name to the end of a list, and now I'm creating a student object. So I'm creating an entire object. Right now we just have two methods, which one of them is the init, the other one's tell me about yourself. But the student can keep track of other things like what are your current grades, or what is your current attendance record, or something else. There's other things that the student can be able to do, but just to keep things simple, I just have tell me about yourself as the only method right now. I'm trying to return it so that it says like each individual student is not looking like this. So I'm wondering how do I don't know, change Python object string, the dunder method, right?
Oh, it's too straight.
Return some objects, sure. If you are writing your own class and you want stir to work for you, I'm going to do return here.
Yeah, because under the hood it's
Sorry, let me try a few things.
if that a plus in between student versus not
You don't because you have the space here. I don't know. Yeah, so to answer your thing, the formatted string right over here, because I've added a space before I interpolate, you don't need to do plus. All right, guys in the back, real quick. All right, so I can't figure out why this is not working for right now, but I'll figure it out and let you know. Essentially, I wanted to replace this weird looking thing. So this is actually, it's a student object located at this particular memory address is student one right over here. And instead I wanted it to say like Hollybird from the Marine Corps, like that is an actual object. I'm just saving it. That's the way that I'm representing it. So go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, how does it know that you're going between the different classes?
So I created so the question was, how does it know that I'm working between two classes? So I've got a class here on line 12, and then this is the guts of the class. I've got a class here at line 1, and this is the guts of the class. I created a code platoon cohort on line 23 and a student instance on line 26. So these are two different objects, and the way that it's working is I just have an array, a list right over here of students. I'm just appending whatever you pass in. Whatever you pass in this case, is a student object.
It wouldn't be, I know we're going to learn inheritance next week, but it wouldn't put the student, the add student, go back to the add student.
I got rid of that one.
Okay. But like, what did you put in the parentheses and then call that class, bring it down so that information goes, so you can use the information from the top to,
So the short answer to your question is no. The long answer is why would student need to keep track of add a student name? Isn't that something that the code platoon cohort would want rather than the student name? Like you as a human being, you're a student, right? If I had to say, hey, you should know something called add student name to code platoon cohort, that's your responsibility. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's my responsibility as a code platoon cohort. Like if I want to add a new student, that's something that should be in my class rather than in your class. So if you inherit from student here, and you said, can't I just call add student?
well, student, like the add student. So
Here?
from the, yeah, how are you calling it from the top class to that class?
These are two separate classes. They're not inheriting at all. The inheritance here, if I wanted to do it that way, I'd have to do like student there.
Right.
But these two are unrelated. These two are unrelated things. It's not like puppy and dog. Those two are related things. These are two separate things. They interact with each other, but there's nothing that student has that Code Platoon cohort needs in order to run.
Can you access the object through its attributes?
Yeah.
Like,
So
yeah.
So let's say students at 0 at first name, like that.
Yeah, or like, yeah, that's exactly. Or can you say this the class is student, right?
The class is student.
Can you say student dot add a student and then cancel log that? Not add a student. Where's it up where you trying to print the? Oh, that's in is that in? Oh yeah, okay, that's student. So can you?
Yes, I can call it.
And then it will print the what we call it. You were just trying to. Yeah, that's okay. Let's make sure.
Yeah. So what's happening here is India Platoon is an instance of Code Platoon cohort. It has a instance variable called students on it, which is equal to an array of students. And since I've added Holly as a student, the student one object into India Platoon, I'm accessing that particular object, which is student one, and I'm telling student one to tell me about yourself, which is here on line 7. I'm going to get this example out in Slack. Last question before we take a break.
Oh, yeah, so you said it already. Let's just say you just move through your students and print their attributes, you can see that they're in the list.
Yep, that is true. So if I added just a few more students,
Perfect.
maybe Christian.
Yeah.
I'm going to add student 1, 2, and 3. And I can create a quick for loop for students in India Platoon students. Print student. Tell me about yourself. Oh, whoops. Yeah, you're right. So India Platoon is a instance of Code Platoon cohort. It has an array of students that it keeps track of. I created 3 separate student objects from 24 through 26, which is an instance of this class here. I added those to the India Platoon cohort students by doing add a student, and so it appends onto this list here. And then I'm iterating over each one of those students, saving it as student and saying, hey, each student, tell me about yourself. And that's where these 3 lines come from. Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. 11:25 we'll be back.